In this video, I'm covering the game between Nihal Sarin and Fabiano Caruana from Grand Swiss in Riga in round 2. d4, d5 and c4, knight c3. And here Nihal played a rare move e3, knight f6, knight f3 and now a6. Black tries to take on c4 and push b5, so in case bishop e2 happens, then Black would capture and play b5, bishop b7, and Black would have a normal game also. So he wants to avoid that and takes on d5 and makes this d5 pawn like a weakness. Bishop e2 is played and knight c6. Now white is waiting for Black's bishop to develop either to e7 or d6, so he can capture on c5 and make him to lose the tempo. Because if white takes on c5 right now, then Black is going to develop in one move with bishop c5 from f8. So bishop d6 happens, dc, bishop c5 and b3. Because the e3 is blocking the bishop, now he's opting for the other diagonal to go to b2. Castles, bishop b2 and now bishop a7. Black is just stepping away from the c-file, and also he wants to switch diagonals by playing bishop b8 and maybe to create some battery with queen d6 and to attack white's king. White plays rook c1, rook e8 and now h3. White's idea here was to play bishop d3, knight e2, but he couldn't do that because of bishop g4 pins, which might be uncomfortable in this position, so he plays h3. But the downside of h3 is that Black can just put the pressure on the pawn by playing bishop f5, queen d7, and potentially he has some sacrifices on h3. But at this moment, it's not a big issue for white. Queen d6 is played, prepares this battery with bishop b8, and now bishop d3, like I said. Bishop d7, knight e2. He wants to go to d4 to block this weak pawn on d5. Rook a d8 and now knight ed4. He fulfills his plan, goes to d4, and now he's trying to exchange as many pieces as possible, because when one side has isolated pawn, then it should avoid exchanges. And in this case, white is going for the exchanges. Also here, there was a very interesting move, like rook c4, trying to get your rook to h4, because if you take, then bishop h7 is losing the queen. And after rook h4, white can play also knight f4 and maybe create some attack on the king side. So knight ed4 was played instead. A really normal move, knight e4, and here white plays queen e2. He could have played just bishop e4, d4 and exchange plenty of pieces and put his knight in d4, and this would be an equal position for white. An equal position for white. Okay. Queen e2 was played and now bishop b8. Now this knight on f3 is the only defender of white's king, so it gets a bit scary, but Nihal is just playing rook fd1, queen g6, now threatens bishop h3. And here he makes a mistake, he plays knight h4. He should have played knight c6 first, and after bc6 to go king h1. And this is still slightly more passive for white, but it's not losing any material like in the game. Bishop f5 would happen, and Black would have slight initiative. Even though he's losing the a6 pawn, I think black's chances are more preferable in this case. He plays knight h4, and now the idea is that if he tries queen h6, now knight d5, df5 is winning. Because g7 pawn is hanging, and also if queen g5, then f4 loses the queen because you don't have a square. So knight h4 is played, and here Fabi plays a nice in-between move, knight d4. And after bishop d4, now queen h6. And now there's no knight f5 because there's no support. He has to go back because if g3 is played, then bishop h3 just simply loses the pawn. So he goes back, and now bishop h3. He takes on h3, and now Nihal took, queen takes h3, and now he doesn't have anything better than queen f1. Because if he doesn't do anything, if he keeps his pieces like that, if he tries, let's say, let's play some random moves to make a point. If he plays a4, then black can play rook d6 and get his rook to g6 and give a checkmate very soon. Or rook e6. Even better, not to block the bishop on b8. So he played queen f1, but now Fabi takes the knight on f3, queen g2, because still, rook e6 is a big threat and white has to defend somehow. So he plays queen g2. Now the checkmate threat on g7 is dangerous, so black has to exchange, and he goes h6 here. b4 and rook e6. Maybe here it was better just to exchange bishops immediately by bishop e5, and if he takes rook c7 to go knight d6. And if bishop e2, for example, to get bishop f3 and attack the pawn, now rook c8 might be a good choice. And rook d7, knight e4. And now it's not good to take on d5 because this would lead to a worse rook ending for white. After this, knight e2, b5, and now black would slowly push his pawns on the king side, also put some pressure on those two pawns on the queen side. And with this h passed pawn, I think white's chances are really small. He plays rook e6 here, and a4. h5 is played. I think this move is played because black wants to play rook g6 and to stop white's counterplay with the rook c7 at some point and doubling on the 7th rank by pushing his h-pawn. And you'll see what I mean really soon. Rook c2, bishop e5, and now it seems like Fabi was admitting that his plan was wrong, and now he's playing bishop e5, and now it seems like he lost the tempo, because he could have played this move here, and he's not wasting tempo on rook e6 first. So bishop e5 takes, and now rook c7. And here Fabi plays knight d6. And here in this variation I'm going to show you the potential benefit of h5. Rook g5, king f1, and now if rook b8, now it's not good to take on e4 because even if you double on the 7th rank, now this h-pawn is too fast. And you can just capture on f7, but that's nothing because after h3, black's pawn is not going to be stopped because king e2, h2, rook c1, rook g1, and you cannot do anything. So maybe this was a better try to play like this, to cut off the king from the g file, because he needs to defend the f2 pawn, so he has to go to f1 and rook b8 simply. But of course, he doesn't need to take on e4. He can just play bishop e2, but still, I think black has good chances to convert. Because he can always afford to lose one pawn if he wants to exchange some pieces, which makes his life much easier, and then to play a nice ending. But instead he plays knight d6, which is also okay, I think. Bishop e2 and now rook g5, and they here repeat some moves a couple of times. And now Fabi plays b5, which is very committal. Very committal because a6 now is very, very soft. I think here rook c8 is the best try to play for a win. And after he captures bishop f3, knight e7, and now after rook c1 to go for knight c6. But still, it's not an easy position to play. It's very weird. It seems like it's winning, but it's not easy to suggest anything concrete for black to realize his advantage. King g2 and now b5 is played, after which white gets full compensation for his 2 pawns, because now he's going to get 1. Now the knight on b5 is on fire, and rook b8, bishop f1, because if he takes immediately here, he's getting forked, and he loses the b4 pawn, and now black has a6 pawn and the h pawn, which are passed pawns, and this ending is just horrible for white. So he needed one move to step away from this potential fork, and now d5 pawn is under real danger. Rook g5, king h2, rook g4, and now he takes, because now the h5 pawn is hanging, which is interesting. Rook b4, rook h5, now g6, he goes back. King g7, king g3, and now rook b6. This knight doesn't do anything. This pawn cannot move because black has to defend the knight because it's under attack 3 times. Bishop d3, rook b2, and now white is simply waiting for black to make any move. And now he plays rook d6 here, but this is leading to a forced rook ending with rook b5. And now he plays rook b6, trying to get behind the pawn with rook a6, and now it's not possible to make any progress because the rook on a3 is paralyzed basically, and also white has an option of getting active with his king. a4 is played, rook a7, and now e6 is a threat to use the pin, and now king f8, king g4. Now black also has to be careful about these entries. Rook e3, king f4, rook a3, and now they repeat moves because there's nothing better to do here. Black's king is completely out of game, and there's nothing better. If he tries to push his pawn until a2, then king can just get more active with king g5, king f6, and now black has to worry about potential checkmates, you know, because if he does that, f4 happens, and now you cannot go back to g7 because e6 happens. And if you just ignore it with rook a1, then king f6. This might be even winning for white, because you lose the f7 pawn, and the e5 pawn is also very close to queening. So Fabi chose just to repeat moves like this, and that's it. They made a draw.